The NFL draft is 59 days away. The NFL Combine kicks off this week. You have seen comps flying all over the place on the internet for all of these players. So in the spirit of all that, we're going to go ahead and break down the incoming rookie running back class for 2025. And we're going to give you our comps based on what we've seen thus far. So fellas, let's start with the clear-cut running back one in this class. There's literally no debate around it whatsoever. It is Ashton Jeanty, junior 5'9", 215 out of Boise State. Ty, I'll let you kick us off here. Maybe the better question is what's not to love about Ashton Jeanty's game rather than what is to love? What's not to love about Ashton Jeanty's game, man?
I'll be honest. When it comes to like fantasy football, this is the perfect running back to have in a rookie class. When you look at like NFL, skill sets, the one thing you could probably nitpick is the pass pro, like the pass blocking isn't great, but you can kind of understand it because the guy is 5'9" and he's going to be going head on then with some incoming blitzers and DBs and all that stuff. But again, Ashton Jeanty, he's the perfect blend of vision, speed, power, elusiveness, like any kind of buzzword you can think of to describe a trait of a NFL running back. Ashton Jeanty is that. Again, the vision is probably one of the best things about him. The contact balance is unreal. Like, this dude not only is shaking off tackles, but it's the fact that he can keep his feet moving, that he can wiggle out of arm tackles and stuff. That, again, you see there 152 forced missed tackles this year. Like, the dude doesn't go down easy. He's got everything else that you want in terms of speed and burst, explosiveness. Like, there's nothing to really nitpick outside of the pass protection. But again, in fantasy football, you don't get docked points for being bad in pass protection. So Ashton Jeanty, yeah, he is all the hype. Again, the usage is a little absurd. They are like, gosh, 370 carries.
Oh, I know.
But the thing is, like, he just like Boise State had no reason to not just keep feeding him the ball.
I mean, that's like that. We could gush over Ashton Jeanty all day, right? But I do think that's one of the cons that you could pin on Ashton Jeanty is like that 374 totes is just a stupid workload. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is like stupid. Double O, all caps, everything about it is just absolutely ridiculous. But Cameron, I'll go ahead. What other buzzwords of positivity do you want to use about Ashton Jeanty? Because again, what isn't there to love about this guy?
Yeah, I really think it is just the no weakness when you look at him as a pure rusher. You watch him, and there's reasons that people are pulling out absurd comps for this guy because he hits every single check mark. Right? You watch him, and you're just like, he just doesn't do anything that much better than everything else, and that's because everything he does is so good. But like you said, 750 carries over his career already. That would be really the only negative that he has coming into this season.
Yeah, runs of 50 plus yards in 9 of 14 games this last year. I mean, that's just ridiculous. He's forced a missed tackle on 40% of his totes. Look, we can nitpick a little bit further. The only smallest of things I can nitpick. I hate to be the negative Nancy because you two are just gushing, obviously, and I mean I am too. I think he could just wait a fraction of a second longer behind the line of scrimmage. Like, sometimes he just wants to go and hit the hole and get to that second level, which, look, I don't blame the guy. When you're as explosive as you are, you run with that kind of confidence, right? And I think the other thing is, too, like, he's a hero back, right? Let's just make sure we keep prioritizing ball security. Like, let's make sure we hold on to the ball when you're getting fed this many times. Again, the contact balance, the aggressiveness in which he runs is just unparalleled. Let's just make sure we hold on to the ball. Let's throw out the comps here before we transition. Ty, I'll start with you. Who's your comp here for Ashton Jeanty?
My comp is not a current running back. We were saying this earlier. Most of the comps will be active running backs, but we will have some guys that are no longer in the league. My comp for Jeanty is a guy that is not in the league currently, and it's Marshawn Lynch.
Oh, I like that. I do like a little Marshawn Lynch comp. Is yours in the league currently, Cameron?
Yeah, it is. And it is Jonathan Taylor. And it's really from the, I was trying to, I've seen that comp quite a few times, and I was trying to be original, a little more original with it. But I just watch him, and similar to Taylor, like I said earlier, I just don't see a weakness for him running the ball. Like, you put the ball in his hands, the dude is special. And, we saw that from Taylor at the end of last year. You see that from Jeanty constantly.
This feels so ridiculously high, my comp, at least for Ashton Jeanty, but it's come from a lot of people that I respect in the space, and I do see it. And the one thing we didn't touch on as well, it's like he can catch the ball out of the backfield. Like that is the icing on the cake here for Ashton Jeanty. LaDainian Tomlinson, it's so high. One of the best running backs we've ever seen in the league, obviously, but it's the aggressiveness at which he runs, the skill set of also being able to catch the football. And it wouldn't be the first time we see a guy come out of a small school, explode in his last year, and just absolutely take the league by storm. So, I mean, that's like the lazy analysis of like, oh, that's why Ashton Jeanty is LaDainian Tomlinson. But like, I think if we're going super, super ceiling comp, like I do think that that's the point that Ashton Jeanty could potentially get to. Before we move on to the rest of this class, though, if you want more content, more Dynasty content, more NFL draft content like this all off season long, this is the place you want to be. Make sure you subscribe, turn on that notification bell as well. You will be alerted when all of our newest episodes go up, when we go live to do underdog best board drafts and take our hand at drafting some of these players that we're going to be talking about. We're doing wide receiver comps later this week. I promise you will fall in love with this channel, fall in love with being a part of the fellowship, because we're always talking fantasy football and NFL content over here. So again, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification bell. We appreciate you all who have been a part of the fellowship already. There's not a clear running back two in this class. I think it's different for everyone that you ask. So because we're doing rankings later, I'm just going to transition us to Omarion Hampton. Unique prospect out of North Carolina, because this dude is, I mean, I put it in my notes. He literally runs like a freight train. That's what I think of when I watch Omarion Hampton. Ty, you actually, I'm not going to spoil it. I think you're probably going to be the highest on Omarion Hampton out of all of us. So I'll let you chime in, because you've gushed over Omarion Hampton a few times in our group chat.
Yeah, I I said this too when Cam and I were talking about landing spots for some of these guys a couple of weeks ago. I don't know how people can have the debate for running back 2 in this class, because to me it is clearly Omarion Hampton. I'll just read you the write-up that I have for him out of the film that I've watched so far. It said Hampton is a big physical back who's best utilized going downhill, but can do it all with uncanny wiggle and elusiveness. He can get skinny in gaps to reach a second level and uses excellent bursts to get through the holes. Though not the most agile, he flashes close quarter elusiveness. He shows good fluidity in hands in the pass game while also being a solid pass blocker in the backfield. He shows good speed with the ball in his hands, though he can get caught on long runs, and the lateral speed doesn't match the straight line speed. However, his combination of power and burst with his passing game chops will make him a workhorse at the next level. I see everything in Omarion Hampton. Maybe he didn't have the flashiest season. Maybe it is, we see all the Ashton Jeanty highlights that I think, and with how North Carolina was as a team this year, Hampton just kind of flew under the radar. I think Omarion Hampton, if there was no Ashton Jeanty, Omarion Hampton is the clear running back 1 then in this class.
At this point, I think Omarion Hampton, like from what I've watched on film, again, not fantasy perspective, from what I've watched on film, I think Omarion Hampton is my running back 3, but I mean, there's a very clear case that he could be my running back 2. The other, I'm interested that you used the word wiggly to describe him. I feel like I didn't quite see that on his film. I think that, I mean, you mentioned his elusiveness can be improved upon too. I think he's such a linear runner in my mind, but the one thing I do agree with is when he hits that hole, oh my gosh, he hits the turbo. And I think turbo is a great word for it, because you think about how when you hit a turbo, like if you're playing a race car game, right? And you hit the turbo, it only lasts for so long, right? Like his long speed isn't great, but you know what? That turbo might be enough to get him out ahead of the pack. And if nobody catches him, he is going to the house for sure. Cameron, where do you at on Omarion Hampton? What do you like? What don't you like? Where do you kind of lie on your evaluation here?
Yeah, after I'm just spoil TreVeyon Henderson a little bit. After watching TreVeyon Henderson, I was like, all right, he's clear cut 2. And then I watched Omarion Hampton. I was like, oh, maybe he's not clear cut 2. I think it's a little closer, because watching him, he makes the right decision.
Yes.
Every single time. You're watching it and you're looking, you're watching the end zone view, and he's got, either side of the lineman, and he picks that right hole every time. And he does not miss. He does the same thing in pass protect. He hits, he picks up the right guy every time. And if you're an NFL franchise, obviously that's exactly what you want. And like Ty said, the difference between him and Jeanty is Jeanty has all the intangibles physically. I think Hampton is very close to him for the rest of it. I just think some of the physicals, he just doesn't quite match up. But obviously, we're comparing him to a guy that people are saying is like the next Saquon Barkley.
Yeah,
So very, very few people in the world compare to Saquon Barkley. So I think that's a fair comparison. I'm not saying Hampton's bad. I just saying
no.
I think that's what the difference is between the two.
Base, balance, and violence. I mean,
Yep.
those are the three words that I use to describe Omarion Hampton. He runs with such a strong base, great balance, great vision, and he's not afraid to hit a dude. He's not afraid to truck through somebody. So, I really do like Omarion Hampton. I'm kind of shocked he's like as low as running back 5 on some people's boards. Like to me,
Yeah.
I get if you want to slide one of Quinshon Judkins, a Kaleb Johnson, or some people are getting really crazy and throwing out, some of these guys who I think probably belong more in like the running back 8-9 tier in their top 5, right? Like, no judgment, right? We're all watching the same film. We're all making our own evaluations. With that said, though, where are we at on comps? Ty, who do you have for Omarion Hampton?
I've got Joe Mixon because I think the way
yeah.
that he can at least get to the outside with speed, he's not going to always beat you to the edge, but then he mixes that with physicality and power and stuff, and I'm like, that's Joe Mixon like through and through.
Yeah, I think Joe Mixon is a really, really good comp here. I do agree with that one. Cameron, where are you at?
I had Josh Jacobs. I think they're similar size. I think they both, catch the ball in the backfield well. I just think they do enough similar that when I watch him, I see a lot of Josh Jacobs in his game.
I'll be honest. I had market pantry Josh Jacobs. Like I don't know if he's gonna quite totally hit the ceiling of Josh Jacobs, but you're totally right. The style in which he plays with reminds me a lot of Josh Jacobs, and I really do like that Joe Mixon comp as well. Let's go ahead and move on to these Ohio State running backs. Let's start with TreVeyon Henderson, who, look, in terms of dynasty fantasy football, there's a reason we were talking about this dude as the running back 1 in this class for many years prior to this past year, before Ashton Jeanty decided to literally light the world on fire. And Cameron, you absolutely love TreVeyon Henderson. So I'll let you start our discussion here and list all the positive things about why you love TreVeyon Henderson, because I'm with you. I get durability's an issue, but man, I can't deny what I see on film, man.
Yeah, the thing is when you watch TreVeyon, you watch the film and you go, wow. Like his feet move so unbelievably quick at all times. And they do not stop. There's a reason he averaged 7 yards per carry. Obviously, he's split in the backfield, Quinshon Judkins. But we got to remember too, this guy's put up 42 rushing touchdowns over his career. Judkins transfers in from Ole Miss this last season. So, you look at it and you're like, he split the backfield in college. Can you really do it? But when you watch him, he gets in space. You can't take him down, right? You can't catch him either. If once he's gone, he's gone. And so I think it's just, you see just so much of that explosiveness. And yeah, he's a guy that I think any, offensive coordinator is going to kind of salivate over because of if I can just get him in space, this is what he can do.
He's got a ton of juice. He's a home run hitter. I fall in love with prospects like that personally. And you bring up the split with Judkins. Again, NFL Stock Exchange, they're consume their content during this NFL draft season, please. They post a ton of great content over there. They brought up if you really want to knock Judkins and Henderson for splitting a backfield, actually, and I don't even know if it was Stock Exchange, it might have been the Dynasty Football Guys show. This is still a business. When you're TreVeyon Henderson and you're dealing with injuries, look, I don't mind sharing a backfield with this guy if it keeps me healthy going into the NFL draft. I'll put out, watch my film. My film will do the talking. And freaking A, man, it sure does the talking. Ty, where are you at on TreVeyon Henderson? Are you in love with him just as much as Cam and I are?
I love him. I don't think I would have him as my running back 2 in this class.
Okay.
Just because I think some of the deficiencies that I saw was just some inconsistencies with the vision where he is so set on one path that if he's going between the tackles, like he's just going to go in one line. And it's like, dude, like if you waited just half a beat, you would have seen a hole open up on the opposite side that you could just literally, since you are a one cut back, just cut to that hole and then you're gone. Right. So I saw a bit of that. the contact balance is also a worry for me, that like if he does get caught up, the feet stop and then he goes down. Like he there's not much of a fight with him. He will try to go forward, but the feet don't keep turning. And then the size, like it's not the worst size in the world, but again, with the injury history, it makes me concerned that he's not going to be the every down back in the NFL, that he can be a 1A in a really good backfield, but we're forever going to be caught in this, like, give him the full workload, but we're not going to be able to, because again, the injury concerns may be the simplest way to sum it up.
Yeah, the durability, obviously, I mentioned that's a big one. I do think he does have a smaller frame for pass pro, right? That is another knock you could put on him, and like I don't disagree with you. I think his inside vision just needs to be improved upon. I don't think you can tell he just doesn't trust his vision between the tackles. But where are we at for comps? This is where I think we're gonna get a little bit fun with the comps. Oh, the other thing, sorry, one more thing we need to mention with TreVeyon Henderson. Phenomenal in the pass game, right? If
Oh
you get
my word.
if you get the ball into his hands, oh my gosh, he's gonna make something happen. So he is great in the passing game as well. Which I'll kick us off on comps because it plays into my comp. This screams Aaron Jones to me. TreVeyon Henderson screams Aaron Jones, where if you get him to that second level, he's got the right vision to set up the blocks at the second level to make sure he gets into the end zone and hits that home run and maintains that next level speed, right? So to me, that's Aaron Jones. You mix him in the passing game as well, allow him to get into space and make something happen at the second level. Aaron Jones, that's my comp. Ty, where are you?
I'm somewhere between Aaron Jones and Tony Pollard. I see a lot of Tony Pollard in his rushing ability when he goes between the tackles, but I see a lot of Aaron Jones then when he's going to the outside in the pass game as well, because Aaron Jones, like let's call a spade here. Aaron Jones is a very good pass blocker. TreVeyon Henderson might just be the best pass blocker in this running back class. So that's where I ended up. I'm somewhere between Tony Pollard and Aaron Jones.
How about you, Cam?
If you're on the audio feed, I apologize because you're not going to get watch Ty's face, but I have a feeling he's going to hate this one. And I want to say, I'm not saying his career will be this player. I'm saying I think they're similar. This is my only.
You're not helping your case.
Only non-current active player. It's Jamal Charles.
Interesting.
I told you Ty was going to hate it, but it's because of what I see him do in open space. It's because of the way that he's able to catch the ball. It's the way that he's able to get out there. You know, I mean, the dude averaged 10.5 yards per reception this last season. He averaged 7 yards per carry. I think he's just so unbelievably dynamic. I understand the holes in his game, Ty. I do. I understand that there is a lot holding him back from being, you know, an every down back like Jamal Charles. But even you look at Jamal Charles, a little bit undersized. He's 5'11", 208 pounds, missed a couple seasons with injury, right? I think in today's NFL, teams know we just can't use a guy like that. But that's just me trying to tell you, I think he's unbelievably special in space.
You can go ahead and rebuttal. Go ahead and rebuttal. Yeah.
Look, it's not the most egregious comp I've seen, but man, who is you said Jonathan Taylor for Ashton Jeanty. Who is your comp for Hampton again?
Josh Jacobs.
So okay, the comps very much line up with your rankings,
which checks out in this case. Look, before we move on to the other Ohio State back that is getting quite a bit of buzz this offseason, let's take a quick break. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We've talked about comps for Ashton Jeanty, Omarion Hampton, and TreVeyon Henderson. Let's dive on into the other Ohio State running back in this class, Quinshon Judkins. Ty, I'll start with you on this one. Where are you at on Judkins? because going from Ole Miss to Ohio State for his junior year, I think I lost a little bit of the reason why I really liked Quinshon Judkins. His Ohio State tape almost confused me even more.
Yeah, I get that to a certain extent because at least like the player at Ole Miss was like, there's something here. Then
Right.
going to Ohio State, it was like, hey, you're not exactly like again, you're going to a very reputable program in Ohio State where you're playing in a really good offense. But if you're looking to like, again, give yourself the best exposure to the NFL,
Yeah.
is it really going to be Ohio State? And like, again, like 193 carries compared to, again, I don't want to keep comparing these guys to like Ashton Jeanty, but Ashton Jeanty getting like 370 carries, Omarion Hampton getting over 250 carries. Like, that just goes to show you that the sample size is just a little bit smaller and it makes it a much more, I don't want to call it a grind because when I say it's a grind of a film, that can have some negative connotation to it. And it's really not for Judkins. Like, I think to just sum up Judkins, he can be a kind of high floor 3-down back at the next
Yeah.
level because of the size, his ability in the pass game, though not like the most, he's not TreVeyon Henderson in the pass game. Like let's just make that clear right out of the gate.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for a guy that can just get you, yards in between the tackles, give you 5 or 6 yards a carry, Judkins can be your guy because the thing is like he hits you and he hits you hard. So defenders that go in to tackle him, they're going to remember that. So I think while he can be a high floor 3-down guy, he's probably going to be in a split backfield in the NFL. He's going to be that early down goal line, short yardage back with the ability though, that he can, get loose and break a big one because again, that was the kind of runner that he was at Ole Miss.
Yeah, he's a finisher. He finishes his runs. He has great contact balance and balances that then with great physicality as well. The thing, again, this is where I'm also trying to not penalize him too much for making the business decision, like we talked about with TreVeyon Henderson, to go to Ohio State, to get more exposure, to not have to shoulder an entire backfield by like 193 carries isn't like anything to slouch at. But again, when you compare it to an Omarion Hampton, even at that, you wish you'd see the workload from Judkins that he got at Ole Miss. I mean, he was getting a hefty workload at Ole Miss. Where do you lie on Judkins here, Cameron? How are you kind of rectifying this imbalance of what we got at Ole Miss to, okay, how do I balance this with what I saw at Ohio State? Because it's not quite the same film of what I saw at Ole Miss.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, dude still averaged 5.5 yards per carry at Ohio State, right? He still had a nose for the end zone. He had 45 rushing touchdowns in 42 career games. I think it's, when you look in today's NFL, right, I think it's good to have a role when you're going into it. And I think Quinshon Judkins is going to go in and you're going to know what his role is. And it's going to be that, like Ty said, early down work, short yardage guy that I need someone to go get me 3 yards. Judkins is going to go get me 3 yards kind of a player. So I do think that he has, out of the 3 that we've covered so far, right, he's got the most shortcomings in kind of the peripherals. But if you look at the role that he's going to fill in the NFL, I think he's very good at that.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up his 5 yards per tote as well. I mean, you look at his games against the Big Ten this last year, though. I mean, again, I'm trying not to nitpick and penalize the guy for things that might not even matter, but his production dipped against the Big Ten last year against good competition. I just small things that give me enough hesitation on Judkins where just doesn't excite me in the same way as he does with the first 3 guys we talked about, and even one of these guys we're going to talk about afterwards. Where are we at on comps? Because again, we need to rectify this Ole Miss with what we saw at Ohio State. It's his most recent film, so you want to put weight into that. Where are we at in NFL comps? And Ty, since you kicked off our discussion here, I'll start with you.
I've got David Montgomery.
I do
just
as
because
well.
I see both of them as guys that no way.
We all have David
Really?
Montgomery. Yeah.
Real original guys. Come on. Way to go. Way to go, y'all.
I mean, it screams David Montgomery to me, man. I'm sorry. It really does. But go ahead. Finish your thought.
I think the best way to say it is just that like Judkins doesn't have like game breaking qualities.
Yes.
to be like a game wrecker, but he's going to be very useful in the right role, like a David Montgomery is. Like, again, Montgomery from a fantasy perspective, like he did have some really good years as the lone back in Chicago, but now in Detroit, he looks better from a football perspective, even though it's not great in fantasy land. So again, I think David Montgomery is like the perfect comp for him.
Yeah, anything you want to tack onto that, Cameron? Because again, I could tack on a few things that I've already expressed concerns about, but then it's just beating a dead horse.
Yeah, I think it too. The reason I liked Montgomery is he is a capable pass catcher, right? It's
Mhm.
not a forte or anything like that. Like Montgomery is the same way. But when you have a Jahmyr Gibbs or a TreVeyon Henderson, you're not going to spotlight that for that player. The other thing is, I think he's similar to Montgomery, where you put him on a good offense, he's going to be very productive. You
Yeah.
have him on a bad offense, right? He's not a guy who's going to produce out of nothing, right? You put Jeanty in a bad offensive line, he'll produce. You put Omarion Hampton, I think, in a bad offense, I think he's still going to produce. Whereas Judkins, it might just not look as good because of, if he just doesn't have the talent around him.
I mean, the lazy place that you could hope for him to land is Chicago. Haha, with Ben Johnson, got his David Montgomery, right? But like Ty, you and I have joked on live streams before in best ball drafts. What happens when Judkins becomes a Cincinnati Bengal and they're in scoring position all the freaking time? I mean,
Mhm.
that's a great compliment to Chase Brown's Lightning right here with
Hmm.
with Judkins. So there's a lot of great spots he could end up and actually produce, again, from the fantasy perspective, fantasy value, but also like be a valuable asset to an NFL team in that early down around the goal line finishing role. I am frankly more excited about Kaleb Johnson out of Iowa, though. I watched Kaleb Johnson's film. I love it. I love Kaleb Johnson. Cameron, where are you at? I'll let you all spew your thoughts first before I pile on my love for him.
So Kaleb Johnson conflicts me, I'll say a little bit, because I do see it when you watch him. Arm tackles don't bring him down.
No,
Right? He runs through the arm tackles. He's a powerful runner. I don't know that the vision is as good as an Omarion Hampton. I just don't see him always making the right read in every situation. I think when you watch him, most of the highlights, especially that people are posting, are these long runs, but that's what gets people excited.
yeah,
Is he's got a couple runs where he kind of breaks away. He makes one guy miss through an arm tackle. He breaks out, but I just think those 2 to 3 yard runs for some guys, they turn those into 4, 5, 6 yards. I just don't see Kaleb Johnson doing that a ton. So that's my little bit of a concern there. Is I just don't see him making those small runs turn into just a couple more yards. Right? He does fall forward, but he doesn't make a guy miss to get those extra yards. Right? He takes the hit and falls forward, but he doesn't make a guy miss it and then take a hit and fall forward. I don't know if that makes sense or if I'm
yeah,
just
yeah.
babbling.
No. That makes 100% sense because the note I have here, it's not that he's an aggressive runner, but he's an explosive runner. He runs very composed. Um, he patiently waits for the hole, and once he finds it, he plants and he bursts through the hole. Um, it's not necessarily an aggressive posture at which he runs, but it's an explosive one, which is I frankly value that quality of if you can be patient, find the hole, you'll be successful at the next level. Where are you at though, Ty, with Kaleb Johnson? You were kind of nodding in agreement with what a lot of Cameron was saying.
I'm very conflicted with him too, just because you see the size of Kaleb Johnson at 6 foot 225. At least that's what Iowa listed him at. We'll see
Yep.
what he actually comes in
What he
at the
weighs in at.
combine. But it's weird because you would think that he can, win with power in the run game, and that's very much not his game. He would rather win again being patient, finding the hole, and then exploding through the hole there, right? Like so. I don't know if I can necessarily say that it's like it's not adding up in my head when it comes to Kaleb Johnson because again, when you see those big plays that he can, that he can create, like there is serious intrigue then for a guy like Kaleb Johnson. But I think he needs to find the perfect spot in order to be a true difference maker for an offense. I think I remember watching his film going like, it's kind of like Kenneth Walker in the receiving game where
Sure.
like people are going to say that he can't do it. And it's no, he can do it. He just wasn't asked to do it at Iowa. So again, I think he needs to find like the perfect landing spot where teams will be able to see him at his best and put him in positions to be his best when it is going to the outside, when he can be patient. But if you're going to if you want him to be your power back and your downhill guy, you are probably going to value Quinshon Judkins more than you are Kaleb Johnson.
Sure. And I do think landing spot in the system is going to matter more for Kaleb Johnson than potentially the other 4 running backs that we've already talked here, right? Um, you do wish the speed was better. It's good. It's not great. He hits the hole, he explodes through it, but he doesn't have second level speed that makes him a breakaway back per se. Go ahead. Yeah.
I think what creates the home run plays and the big explosive runs for Kaleb Johnson is the patience and
Yes.
not the breakaway speed,
Oh,
right?
100%.
With his patience,
100%.
he can let the defense sink in and then he can hit the hole and the defense is not in position and not filling the gaps. And then he can take off and go versus like a TreVeyon Henderson that can get the home run runs with his speed and doesn't need to exactly be patient for, for things to develop in front of him.
Yeah, that is 100% it. And the lateral agility just quite isn't there. He's for Kaleb Johnson, he's not super creative either. That like these are just like the cons that I list, and like, but ultimately, I love the composure that he runs with. People are talking about he has like the patience of a Lev Bell, right? Like the comps are all over the place for this dude. Now, I'm not saying I agree with the Lev Bell comp. I am just saying people are throwing that out because they're like, man, he is just so patient, and when he hits the hole, he can run through. He can run through at least one guy. He breaks the arm tackles. He's not the most physical runner in the world, but his patience is what is going to help him win. Uh, but again, the comps are all over the place. I've also seen Jordan Howard. But I don't.
That feels like a diss.
Right, right. That's what I was thinking. Najee Harris has been thrown out just because they both wear purple and or purple, black and gold. Excuse me. I don't really like that. I've seen Lance Zierlein as Tyler Algier. I mean, that one a little bit of I get it. A little bit of a head scratcher in my head. Brees Hall. I don't know where that one came from. Now I'm just throwing out what people have tweeted out in the Twitterverse, right? The one that I've landed on, though, I'm going to get a little bit creative with this one. Aldi DeMarco Murray. That's where I've kind of landed on Kaleb Johnson. And I say Aldi because you know what? It's definitely not as good as the full brand DeMarco Murray, but what I'm watching, I get the essence of what both of these players are accomplishing on the field. I get the essence of what the Aldi chocolate chip cookies are trying to accomplish. They don't taste as good. They're not as good as the actual Cub chocolate chip cookies I can buy. But you know what? I see what they're getting at here. So that's where I landed. It's an Aldi DeMarco Murray for me. Cam, I'll come to you. Who's your comp for Kaleb Johnson?
All right, I need to prepare you because
that's right. You said this one was a little. I don't know.
Oh boy.
The way I described it earlier of he's a big play or he's like 2 to 3 yards. That's what made this player come to mind, not necessarily the way that they run the ball. So I kind of want to put it from that perspective, but it's Ken Walker. I think Ken Walker is a more powerful, Ken Walker wants the contact, but when I watch the two of them, I think that they don't quite make enough happen at the line of scrimmage until they do, and then all of a sudden it's the home run, right? Yeah. It's the 40-yard. I think Ken Walker's got better speed, better breakaway speed. I think he's a little more powerful. So I understand like that one. I couldn't come to one that I truly liked. So if you're gonna rip any comp this episode, you can rip this one.
Well, but I think you bring up a valid point there though, because these comps are all over the place for Kaleb Johnson. Nobody can agree on what kind of a comp they want to give him, at least with some of these that we brought up, right? Like, okay, we get the essence of what we're going after here, but yeah, I wouldn't necessarily think to comp Ken Walker to DeMarco Murray, right? But I get what you're saying here too, because I thought about Ken Walker. I'm like, it just doesn't quite sit there and resonate right with me. So I don't mind the Ken Walker one. I really don't, because I mean, when people are throwing out Jordan Howard and Tyler Algier, I mean, at this point, you may as well throw out Ken Walker as well. Ty, maybe you'll be the voice of reason of all of us here. Where's your comp?
I do want to throw the disclaimer that I'm still in the process of evaluating
Yeah,
Kaleb Johnson, so the comp
absolutely.
is not finalized yet.
Totally.
I'm not sure I like the comp at the moment, but I get Ramondre Stevenson with Kaleb Johnson a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, I think Ramondre has a bit more power to his game than Kaleb Johnson does, but I see two guys that can be patient, and what hurts Ramondre is that he's running behind a New England Patriots offensive line that is absolute garbage. So his patience gets wasted because his offensive line can't set anything up for him. So again, I think Ramondre uses a little more power in his game than Kaleb Johnson, but that's like the one that I lean towards more. I've seen other people do like James Conner, and I'm like, I'm
Not
not. I
quite.
don't. Yeah,
Not quite.
I think Ramondre is a better fit for what I see personally than James Conner.
I really don't hate that for Kaleb Johnson either. Again, Kaleb Johnson is one of those guys. Again, I've watched a film I love, but like I'm not. I think in process is still a really, really good word to describe Kaleb Johnson, because I do think he's a fun watch, but he's also a unique one to evaluate given the fact that he's 6', 225. I mean, he is the biggest running back that we have talked about thus far. So yeah, Kaleb Johnson, he's an interesting. Let us know your Kaleb Johnson comps down in the comments. I'm really curious to hear what you all have thrown out based on what you're watching from him as well. How I want to close this out, fellas, is look, this class is so deep. We could go for another, 35 minutes into this? We could go for another 35. I keep talking about running backs in this class. I think what I want to do, though, is I want to wrap it up a little bit more quickly and have us each touch on one player that could kind of fall anywhere in this, like running back 6 to running back 10 to 12 range in this class. It seems like Jeanty, Hampton, Henderson, Judkins, Johnson are somewhere in this top 5, right? Jeanty's at 1. It's really like 2 through 5 or 6. That's up for debate. But let's each touch on one more running back. We won't go too deep into it, but at least give a comp, give some of our thoughts on who we've watched thus far. So Cam, I'll start with you here because you want to share a little bit about Devin Neal.
Yeah, he's out of KU, right? I mean, he was productive this year, scoring 16 touchdowns. All right, you see great yards after contact, forced a lot of missed tackles. He's 220 pounds. The issue with Devin Neal is he doesn't really play like he's 220 pounds.
No.
Right, he'll run at a guy, but he doesn't want the contact. He wants to make you miss. He wants to finesse. That's really what he's looking for. Obviously, he's been pretty good at it. The issue is when you come to the NFL level and everybody knows that is your move, all of a sudden it doesn't quite look as good as when you're trying to play against, Big 12 competition. So that was my biggest concern. I think he's got a lot of upside. I think if they can teach him to play big, then I think obviously he can continue to progress. I just don't know if that's necessarily something you're going to change quick enough as a probably 3rd, maybe 4th round pick to really be a consistent contributor in the NFL. My comp for Devin Neal is Travis Etienne. He was Etienne's a guy that I see very similar. They're both about 215, 220 pounds. Etienne, another guy, elects to take the finesse. I don't think the vision is unbelievable for either of them. I think they both can, do stuff out of the backfield, but I just think that they both are going to have limitations when it comes to being a high-end running back.
Devin Neal, a very technically sound runner, but does not play to 5'10", 220. I would agree with you there. Ty, I'll let you share a little bit here about Dylan Sampson. I'm really curious what you have to say here, because I'll just say I have my questions.
He's an interesting watch. I think that's the best way to start it off. He's coming off an ultra productive year. As you can see, 250 carries, almost 1,500 yards and 22 touchdowns. That was the single season record for Tennessee, by the way. He enters with great burst and speed. He did what the team needed needed of him by running between the tackles, just protecting the ball and just getting small chunks of yardage. That's what we saw with Jalen Wright in Tennessee, except Jalen Wright, could break off some big runs because he could just kind of sneak through arm tackles and with his size, at least. I think Sampson's skill set is going to be best utilized if he's more of an outside threat than he is in between the tackles threat. Like, he did make the right read between the tackles, but I think you can get him in space with his speed, that he can shoot a gap or he can find a cutback or something like that. I think if we, for what we were saying about Kaleb Johnson about needing to land in the right situation, Dylan Sampson needs to find the right situation in order to really be an impact player. The biggest question mark that he has to overcome is the fumbling issues. So if teams can at least get him to stop coughing up the ball, he didn't lose all the fumbles, but again, when the ball hits the ground out of your hands, it's not a good look. So again, I think Dylan Sampson needs to find the right situation, but there's a lot of traits that he has that are really, really intriguing, like the burst and speed that if he can get to the second level, or even if there's a path that opens up, Duke can shoot right through it. And I'll admit, Tennessee's offensive line did not do any favors this year for the guy. So to see the kind of production that he had just goes to show what kind of runner he is. He's not a tremendous athlete. Things do need to line up in order for him to be a true like impact player in the NFL.
I worry about just the nature of Tennessee's offense and how it's going to translate to the next level. This team knows how to scheme their dudes up. It's just such a unique offense that I don't know how Dylan Sampson is going to translate. And I'm not going to like fall back on the fumbling issues as a reason to like not like a guy. But again, is he going to be extremely system dependent coming out of an offense like the Tennessee Volunteers? I mean, the guys who have just come out of this offense the last few years where you're just like, why haven't they fully translated to the league yet? And I get some of the situations that they landed in haven't been great. Like, I'm not going to just say like all Tennessee Volunteers are bust when they come into the league, but that's where my biggest question resides, is just the nature of this Volunteers offense. Do you have a comp for Dylan Sampson lined up?
I do. I had James Cook, which I remember it was because James Cook coming out, I wasn't the biggest fan of. And I think that sounds a bit crazy because you look at the year that James Cook had when he has 16 rushing touchdowns, you're like, oh, well, maybe we were a little wrong on the eval for James Cook. But I see them both very similarly in the sense that, like, if you can get them into space, they're going to be hard to stop because of the speed and burst that they have. But they're not the most physical guys. They will get wrapped up if it's congested, they will go down. There's no escaping it.
I'm really curious to see where I end up coming out on Dylan Sampson again. He's one that I'm really in process on right now. I admittedly haven't watched enough film to like totally form my opinion on him. And I think I'm kind of scared too because of the hesitations that I have going into it. So I digress. I'll close this out here. I'll satisfy all you Twitter nerds out there. I'll go ahead and talk about Camp Skattebo for all you people who love to just post his highlight reels out on Twitter. Look, that being said, you can't help but just feel absolutely juiced when you watch this guy. He runs with such competitiveness. It's literally infectious when you watch it. I would run through a brick wall after watching Camp Skattebo, man. He wants to run through somebody on every run. Based on that alone, again, NFL Stock Exchange threw this out there, and immediately, like, my mind just exploded. I'm like, I would be shocked if Cam Skattebo isn't a Las Vegas Raider if they don't take a running back in the first round. He screams Pete Carroll. Absolutely screams Pete Carroll. Look, the contact balance, that's what everybody is raving about. It is absolutely phenomenal. His top speed goes from 0 to 100 really quick. Now, that's not to be mistaken. His top speed needs to be improved upon, right? This dude is not. He's not fast, but he gets to his top speed relatively quickly because he wants to literally demolish somebody on every single run. And the other thing that I don't know if he's getting enough credit for, he's like surprisingly good lateral agility too. With how much power he wants to run with, he can move side to side pretty well. My comp is James Conner here because I think he runs with the same physicality. James Conner's he's never afraid of contact. But you know what? James Conner, when you see James Conner bounce outside, you're like, oh, that was actually kind of nice. It's shocking enough where I just see a lot of similarities here. I do think Skattebo runs with probably more aggressiveness than James Conner, but I do think James Conner is probably a little bit more lateral quickness, despite Skattebo not disappointing in that category as well. I mean, the big things you're going to watch out for at the next level is like he demands collision. You're just going to be concerned about that at the next level. It's just going to lead to injury inevitably. But the acceleration, sorry, I'm like where I lost my note, my spot in my notes. Good lateral agility, as I mentioned, but the acceleration out of the cuts, again, to get to that top speed again, it's not quite there. So I love Skattebo. I really do. I think every NFL team is going to love him. You look at some of the notes on Lance Zierlein's scouting report at the bottom. He always includes the sources tell us portion, right? And one from an AFC executive. I'm just going to close on this. You hear guys say, I'm built different, but it's usually all talk. But this guy is really built differently. He sees and plays the game like a linebacker.
Yeah.
That describes right.
I was like, somebody's got to mention the head. Someone's got to say something.
He's got a bowling ball attached to that neck. I mean, geez, he's like Miley Cyrus coming in on a wrecking ball. Like, bang! That one is brutal. That's crazy. I will say,
can we get an edit of that? I need an edit of that.
Just have Miley flying in
on Cam Skattebo's head.
Brutal.
Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Sorry, I said
that was brilliant.
My comp for Skattebo is Javonte Williams.
Okay, I wasn't expecting that. I'm not gonna lie.
Just wants to find contact, right? He's got the sneaky lateral. I think it's probably closer to Javonte Williams post ACL tear.
Sure.
Just because of the lack of top end speed, but that's kind of who I see when I watch that.
Anything you want to put on top, Ty, for all the Camp Skattebo maniacs, fanatics out there? I can't call them maniacs because I really do like Skattebo, but I also have to be careful with how high I put him in my rankings. I do think there's a decent amount of like downside if things don't pan out here.
Oh man, I don't want to ruin like your analysis or your guys.
No, go ahead
for him.
Yeah, go ahead. I did it with Dylan Sampson.
That is true.
Well, in that case,
you're giving me permission.
Gosh, Alfred Morris, like it's, I like, the career
it's not
of Alfred
sexy,
Morris.
but
It's not like again, Skattebo's. He's got to find. I feel like he's going to be like the bridge running back that's going to get 1 or 2 years as a workhorse.
Yeah.
And people are going to be like, holy cow, like he can do it. And then the team's going to sign or draft someone better. And they're going to be like, why did you do that? And it's like, well,
I've heard a lot of people say Dameon Pierce here too, for the exact same reason. It's the dude who wants to run with aggressiveness. But the problem is it might just not turn into efficiency at the end of the day. Again, NFL Stock Exchange, they're like, this dude just clearly just tries hard, and like that's not a bad thing, but that's also Dameon Pierce, and we've seen some of those guys fizzle out in the league, right? So that's like, I can gush over why I like Cam Skattebo, but I'm also not afraid to say like it could very well not pan out, or he could just be a 1 year or one hit wonder with an NFL team, and then before you know it, you're like, wait, Cam Skattebo, like where's he at now? Oh, he's third string for the Cleveland Browns? Like it could easily just turn into that too.
Special teams.
Oh, no, don't cast that on my boy so soon.
Yeah.
Even though it's possible in year 2.
I do want to say, like, I understand you're trying to slander him with Alfred Morris, but let's not forget 2012, Alfred Morris, second in yards with 1,600 rushing yards, only behind MVP Adrian Peterson, second in rushing touchdowns with 13. I mean, he had 4,000 total yards in his first 3 seasons. Tie.
Well, I'm talking like,
if you can get that out of Skattebo
in his first 3 years.
Well, well, how do I say this? I'm talking about like
play style,
Washington, like
right.
Well, I mean, like that was his year, but like the end of the Washington, what team, what mass?
Dallas?
No,
He was
well,
with,
maybe
the 49ers for a minute, wasn't he?
he
He was-
was. No, but I'm talking like 2014, 2015. Alfred
Oh, okay.
Morris. Like,
I see.
All right.
I what's the mascot? What was that
Well, yeah.
The Hogs.
those ones.
Go Dogs. Oh man, we'll wrap it out there. The Washington Redskins before they became the Washington Commanders. We'll name that. Look, if you want more content like this, we're coming back on Thursday with wide receiver comps here. So we're gonna have some more fun with comps this week, especially leading up to the NFL draft. We'll get to our rankings as well in the coming weeks for Dynasty specifically. So if you want more of that content, subscribe to the fellowship here, turn on that notification bell as well. You'll be alerted when our newest content is up. And again, we're going live. I think we're going live every week, every other week. We missed out on a few weeks. We had a few things pop up where, things quite couldn't get live. We're busy fellas outside of this. All right. But we're going to be drafting some of these rookies in best ball drafts already over on Underdog, which you heard from earlier. So again, subscribe, turn the notification bell so you know when all of our newest episodes are up. This is I had a lot of fun here with this, fellas. So I'm looking forward to where we go with the wide receivers on Thursday this week. Make sure you follow our social. Go ahead.
Sorry,
You can chime in before I send it out.
I feel like there's going to be some reckless comps in that episode.
Look, I'll say this: the wide receivers are a little bit less fun than the running backs this year. And maybe a little less is probably a little too nice. The running backs are a lot more fun this year than
that's
the wide receivers. I mean, it's just the nature of the talent in this class, though, right? It'll be different in the coming years, where we'll have more fun talking about the wide receivers and the running backs.
Wow.
But I don't know. It'll be 2026. Will be an interesting class. Well, I'll have to see where I land on that class. Make sure you follow our other socials as well. FFL is on Twitter. The FFL is on Instagram. Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. So much more content coming out there for you all as well. You can follow our personal socials, especially as we start getting more deeper into the film here. More opinionated on our dynasty stances as the offseason goes on. I am at Lucas Wenzel on X, Camlaw FFF, Cameron, Tyler_Laugh. Again, back with wide receiver comps later this week. Happy Combine week to you all. See y'all later this week. Deuces.
Deuces.
Deuces.